This puppy rolling.
Okay.
Tell me when we can start.
All
We
right.
may start.
Okay. Welcome to the planning board meeting of Thursday, April 2nd, 2020. This meeting is being conducted remotely via Zoom video conferencing. Planning board members that are participating remotely include myself, Anna Houston, Chair, Delisa Laterzo, Vice Chair, Mark Montanari, Clerk, and our members Jerry Portante and Jeff Yates. All votes will be conducted by roll call this evening. Other people who join the meeting are set so that your microphones are muted when you join. For the meeting to occur in an orderly fashion, we ask that people who join keep your microphones on mute so that background noises do not interfere with the meeting. And should any member of the public wish to speak, we ask that you use the chat box or the raise hand option to let staff know you would like to be recognized. Staff will monitor the chat box and inform the chair of individuals that wish to speak. After speaking, the microphone will be placed back on mute. So this is our new world, folks. Thank you for being here tonight, fellow board members, and thank you to any viewers that we have this evening. So tonight's agenda includes the following. We have board business, which includes public input, board member updates, unfortunately no minutes, bills and payroll. We have public hearing for a zoning bylaw related to changing the word select board of selectmen to select board. Continued hearing for Healy Corner. MAPC, the Massachusetts Area Planning Council, I believe, will be presenting to us on transfer development rights, and then continued hearing for the Reuben Hoare Library. So that is the agenda items for this evening. So first to begin, do we have anyone from the public who wishes to offer input this evening? Okay, it doesn't appear to be that anyone is out there wishing to provide public input, so we'll move on. The next item on our agenda is our board member updates. And so I will start with our Vice Chair, Delisa. Do you have any update for us on the train station area?
No, let's see, we have well, no, I really don't. We have submitted all of our comments to Judy Barrett, and we're waiting for her to get back to us as to when we can expect the final document. But we've told her that we'd like it by the beginning of May.
Okay.
Lauren, did I forget anything? I think that's pretty much the gist of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Mark, any update on housing or 5G?
Affordable housing, we had a meeting last month. We have rolled the program out for vouchers to help residents in the town pay their rent. I think we have 12 people, Mara, is that correct? 12 people on the program?
I think there were a number of them that were still in the pipeline with applications pending in front of the Elder and Human Services Department. But so far, it's been well subscribed. A lot of people interested.
Yep. And we're hopefully going to meet with some large landowners about possibility of some affordable housing in the future, specifically the people that own the land down by the train station and the people that are interested up by the end of Foster Street, the Gutierrez property. So that's about as far as we've gotten in the past couple of months.
All right, great, thank you. And then do either you or Jerry have an update around 5G?
Nothing really. We're still waiting.
Didn't we have an action item from last? I thought we were going to have Chris talk or outside counsel talk with LEWD's counsel? Wasn't that one of the action items?
Yeah, we don't know if they have or haven't talked, but that was how we left it. The lawyers were gonna speak with town council from Light and Water.
Man, can we just follow up with Chris, just see if they talked, or
No, yeah, I will. Yep,
are they doing everything remote too? Or are they active or not active?
they're very active answering all the cities and towns questions about how to
COVID.
deal with remote access, and
So we're not really a priority for them, right? I mean, should we table this until like
5G is not a priority with them. I would say Littleton's still a priority.
I mean, we only have a pandemic going on.
5G is not a priority, but so should we table it for the next meeting, or should we get a response between now and the next meeting?
I don't see any need to rush.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Jerry, since we're going to be talking about TDR later, unless you want to provide some kind of an update now, otherwise we'll just talk about it then.
Yeah, I mean, we did speak yesterday, 2 days ago. Was that yesterday or 2 days ago? It's all blending together. 2 days ago? Yeah. So, and I did review the material with them. I think, are they present? Are they
Not
here
yet.
now?
They'll be in at 7.
Oh, they'll come at 7?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he'll review, I mean, just to set the stage, so he's going to review the PowerPoint that's posted on the website, which will be sort of an intro base level discussion about a sort of a simple version of TDR.
Mhm.
And then we'll need to figure out like what next steps are. And I didn't get a chance to send my feedback, Maren, in writing, but I have a couple observations on that PowerPoint just from a styling perspective. And I believe that the other question I had was I can't remember if we answered this. We're targeting 2021 October meeting, right? Fall town meeting. Was that the date?
I think you guys were talking a little bit across each other when you were asking about timing. Mark said definitely no to the spring town meeting, possibility of this fall's town meeting.
Like 2020, so it's October 2020, not 2020.
Or either this fall or next spring of 21.
Okay, so those were the two target dates that were out there, just so you understand what the parameters were we were talking about.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, great. And then I have one update, form-based code. So those documents were submitted to the town administrator to ask the Board of Selectmen to place on the warrant, which has a placeholder for that. And then we'll need resident support for that at town meeting, presuming we have a town meeting, as zoning is the foundation for revitalizing the commons. So that's still out there as well. One other piece of board business is that we do need to discuss when our next planning board meeting will take place. It will need to be done via Zoom, and for some of the items later that we will be continuing, we need to consider when those dates are. So one option is in 3 weeks on Thursday, April 23rd. The following regular date for a meeting would be Thursday, May 7th. But I want to make sure that we don't get backlogged and wind up with an evening of 8 different things. So if we can take care of some of them, that would be really helpful. What are your thoughts?
Well, what's the I know we continued the public hearings for this meeting. Has there been any feedback from any of the applicants, what their sort of timing is? Has that changed at all as far as getting, because I'm sure their timelines have been impacted by this.
Yeah, the one timeline request that we have is from the library to continue that hearing till the meeting until the 23rd, at which time we should have the peer review complete
What about things like Healy Corner or some of the other items? Are they looking to continue as well, or would they be ready if we went for May?
Those should be ready for May.
Okay.
Well, actually,
Healy
Healy Corner is either, yeah, I'll take that back. Healy Corner is 3 weeks away, or, sorry, would be ready for a meeting on the 23rd.
But we could fit it all in one slot, right? One typical meeting slot.
Do you want to be on the safe side and do the first week of May and catch everybody then? Or do you want to take a chance and do October 23rd and Healy's not ready?
Well, I guess what I'm at, my question is, do you think, like, it's one thing to have, like, this is a pretty watered down meeting, but like if you do Healy Corner, right? Since we haven't done it on Zoom before, procedurally it could get cumbersome. So we might want to put some slack in our schedule. Maybe we only handle 1 or 2 big items, because you might chew up the whole meeting just administratively trying to get through the back and forth.
Correct. That's what I was thinking.
So, but do we have anybody else coming on that's as like big as Healy that we'd have to be worried about something like that?
Well, I think that if we did, we could just put them at the following meeting, which could be May 7th, which would be the first Thursday in May.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm asking is that enough to cover the agenda? If you have one in the May 7th and then you can't fit everything in, do you want to schedule another meeting in May?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you do not wish to have a meeting on Thursday, April 23rd?
If everybody's ready, that's what I'm saying, is if everyone's ready on April 23rd, then you'd have the 2 meetings. If they're not ready and you still have to continue to May 7th, then what do you want to do after that?
Yeah. So I do believe from what Maren has said that the 3 different hearings that are currently on today's schedule, if they're continued, we could hear all of those on April 23rd, that they would be ready. And if we have our May meeting, some new applicants might be there. And then again, if we have additional work, we can schedule something for later in May if we need to. Does that seem okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I just wonder, what's the protocol if we can't get through? I mean, I know we can continue, but like, if we're slow.
Well, I think we can postpone or continue, I should say, anything that we feel that we can't get through. But again, if we have these 3 items, we can also schedule one of them for May. Do you have one of the 3? I mean, we can talk about that later when we get to it. I feel like we could probably get through the 3 of them. What do other folks think?
Yeah, I don't know.
How much discussion has gone on about the library? I guess are you going to be seeing something you haven't seen before, or is it just polishing up what's been presented already?
They have not presented at a hearing yet. It's
Okay.
continued, but they do expect to do a presentation plus have peer review complete for the 23rd.
Okay.
Yep. Sounds like there's some hesitation. So what if we do one of them on the 23rd and the other one on May 7th? Would that feel more comfortable to everyone?
Yeah, I'd rather do the library in April because I think that'll be easier to do via Zoom and save Healy Corner till May. And maybe by then we can have meetings.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Since that's the most complicated and also the most controversial.
Okay, so I'm hearing library April 23rd and then Healy Corner May 7th. Jeff, what are your thoughts on that?
That's fine. My question is, what is Healy Corner's been something, I was looking through the documents. It's been going on for quite some time. Am I voting on that?
No.
No. Okay. So I don't have any thoughts on it then.
You would be on the library, but not on Healy Corner.
Okay. That's my question.
And Mark, how do you feel about what's being proposed?
I think it should be the other way around. If Healy's ready, they've been the longest in the queue. If they're definitely going to be ready, we should hear them first. And open up the library on the 7th, or do them both on the 23rd. I don't think it's fair to Healy to push them back even further. If they're done with the peer review, everything's all set. They've been the longest. They're what we've been dealing with the longest. They should have first shot. That's my own. I don't care, and I don't care when it is. But if they're ready and they want to meet on the 23rd, I think we should accommodate them on the 23rd.
So I have a question, Marin, related to the library. Are they under any sort of deadline that would encumber their ability to keep moving forward if we don't hear them till May 7th?
I don't know if there's a significant difference between the 23rd and beginning of May for them, but I guess I'm a little concerned with their schedule, given the application came in January and we're just now this week got plans. I don't have enough information to say.
So any other thoughts on what we should do?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, so let's proceed like this then, based on what Mark was advocating, and that is if we can hear Healy Corner on the 23rd, and then the library on the 7th. If, however, there is any sort of backup problem regarding the library on the 7th, and I'm sure they will let us know if there is, then, we'll see what else we can do.
You also have to make sure that Healy's going to be ready for the 23rd, right?
Right. I think I heard today that they're interested in moving forward. We will have peer review of the latest information for the 23rd for Healy Corner.
Okay.
Mhm.
Let's do it.
Okay,
I'm fine.
all right. So we are moving forward 23rd for Healy Corner, May 7th for the library. Also on the 23rd, we will hear the select board to, Board of Selectmen to select board amendment. Okay, great. All right, so real quickly, we have the zoning bylaw amendment update wording in the zoning bylaw from Board of Selectmen to Select Board. Marin, we need to reopen that and continue it. Can you please read that?
Okay, so this would be opening the first public hearing on that. Public hearing notice. Public hearing zoning bylaw amendment. The Town of Littleton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, April 2nd, 2020 at 6:45 p.m. in room 103 of the Shattuck Street Town Offices, 37 Shattuck Street, Littleton, to consider a zoning bylaw amendment as described below, sponsored by the Planning Board, according to MGL Chapter 48, Section 5. Zoning bylaw amendment. This proposed zoning bylaw amendment would replace the words Board of Selectmen, wherever those words appear, with the words Select Board throughout the zoning bylaw. The full text of the proposed bylaw amendment is on file with the town clerk and planning board offices and can be viewed during their office hours or online at littletonma.org. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the proposed zoning amendment should appear at the time and place designated or provide written comment by April 1, if possible. Signed, Mark Montanari, clerk.
Okay, thank you. So given that we would like to continue this, do I have a motion?
We're going to continue it to the 7th.
No, this one we should continue until Thursday, April 23rd.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we continue the zoning bylaw amendment till April 23rd.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jerry. All right, so I have a motion to continue this hearing to Thursday, April 23rd at 6:45 p.m. here or at 37 Shattuck Street, room 103, if allowed, and if not, it will be conducted remotely if required. So roll call vote now. Delisa,
Aye. I vote yes.
Mark,
Yay. Yes.
Jerry,
Aye.
Jeff,
Yes. Aye.
and Anna, aye. All right, so we have unanimous on that. Thank you. All right, so that was our item from 6:45 p.m., which we needed to open and work on. So now we can go back real quickly to our board work agenda item. Item D are minutes. Unfortunately, we do not have those available right now, but Lauren, I know, is working on making sure she can access those files. And then moving on to item E, bills and payroll. Since it's not possible for everyone to sign off on the bills and payroll right now, we need to designate someone from the board to review and sign. So do I have a motion on that?
Yeah, I move that the planning board vote to appoint Anna Houston to sign bills and payroll on behalf of the board until the first meeting following the 2020 town elections.
I second.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, what? Jan 20 town elections?
Until the
Right, which is afterward when a new officer slate could be appointed or could be elected.
I know, but once we go back to regular in-person meetings, do we need to do that?
Correct. So what you're saying,
I mean, I would amend the motion to say until we go back to public.
Then we
in-person
meet publicly.
okay,
that's fine.
That's fair.
that's fine. So
I'll second that motion. How's that?
thank you. All right, so let's vote on the amended appointment to sign bills and payroll so that it is until we resume in-person meetings. Okay, so for voting, Delisa,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Jerry,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Anna, aye. Okay, thank you. All right, so now we are rolling along. Well, look at that. Now we're ahead of schedule. We have 6 minutes till we can open the continued public hearing for Healy Corner. Maren, I see two people on, or I see two items in chat. I don't know if that's something we should address.
Okay, so Jen Hager from Sutton, the Planning and Economic Development Director, is visiting our meeting to learn from how the virtual experience works.
From Littleton?
Sutton.
Sutton.
Oh, from Sutton. Oh, okay.
Mhm. Yeah. And
And likewise, I'll probably want to do something like that, visit somebody else who's already going through a public hearing and learn how they're doing it.
Well, Annie, you're doing fine. Nice flowers, by the way.
Thank you. You like them?
Yes.
And a nice touch.
I didn't stage my thing.
Well, it's messy, I'll say that.
Mine? Oh, yeah.
No, mine, not
No,
yours.
my
Yours is
office-
very nicely decorated. So it's good to see everybody has been doing well, staying healthy.
Oh, I was just sick.
You were?
Yeah.
What'd you have?
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't like a cold or anything, but you definitely get a nice little fever and go down for a couple of days.
So you think you got it? You had the coronavirus then?
I don't know. I mean, it could have been. I could have had it back in November. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
But I didn't have any of those typical symptoms. But I'm the third person in this house to get it.
But you had a fever though.
No, it's definitely. I mean, it's like 2 days of just like aches, pains. You don't sleep well, but you can't really stay awake.
Did you have that cough they talk about?
No
No.
cough, nothing.
Hmm.
No.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're feeling better, Jerry. And your family members are feeling better too?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not a bad flu or anything. It's just like a virus. And some people in my company have said the same thing. So I mean, who knows? Like,
Well, maybe it was, and then you're lucky. Now you're immune to it.
I should be so lucky. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd roll the dice.
Maren, are you at town hall?
I am.
I thought so. I'm like, wow, that's
It's all
really
that stuff.
executive looking in her house.
Yeah. Yeah, in our neighborhood, the bandwidth in the evening on our cable is not necessarily that great. I figure,
Yeah.
well, for first meeting that I am officially hosting from here would not be good to not be able to do, so.
So is the entire building just dark? Are you the only person in there right now?
At the moment, yeah.
Oh, that's kind of spooky.
Well, that's not, in the evening, that's not unusual for me, but
Yeah.
I tell you what, having town hall with no public allowed is very eerie.
Yeah, I bet.
Mhm.
Hey, as a matter of like protocol, should we insist that people who attend the meeting, if they're going to speak, they must have their video on?
Actually, usually it's, the recommendation is if they just state their name. So we know who it is.
Okay.
Mark, where are you? Are you in Littleton or are you down at,
I'm up, yeah, I'm
yep,
rested up.
here.
Oh, I'm not. I'm out and about a little bit, but yeah, I'm in Littleton.
Are you not hanging out in Florida?
No. Christ, it's worse. I go stir crazy down there. And miss all of this fun? No, I came home early for this.
See, the one time you can do a meeting remotely and you're not.
I know I'm stuck in Littleton. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
I was in Vegas a couple of weeks ago and it was a ghost town.
Why were you there?
I went to the NCAA basketball finals, the Pac-10 finals, and they canceled it while we were in the air flying there.
Oh,
So we got all the way out there. They canceled it. Wouldn't even let us go to the arena for the finals. So we came back like a day and a half later. We came back Saturday morning. Went out on a Thursday.
Meanwhile, you're flying.
Yeah, that was the 14th. It was a while ago. It was seems like months ago now, but
Yeah, it does.
Right.
pretty normal back then.
Okay, so it is 7:00. So let's move forward to item number 3 on the agenda for tonight. We are opening this continued public hearing for Healy Corner definitive open space subdivision and open space special permit. And so the applicant has requested an extension to May 14th. And so we should vote on approving the extension. And so we can just go
Motion. I'll
ahead.
make a motion that we extend the Healy Corner subdivision, the continued public hearing until May 14th, and hopefully we'll hear it on April 23rd.
Second.
Okay. Thank you very much for that motion and the second. So any discussion? Okay.
Just so I understand process, you're looking to extend the time frame for the planning board to file the decision until May 14th,
Correct.
and combined with that, a motion to continue until April 23rd.
The next meeting for them, yes.
Okay, at 6:45. Shall we shoot for 7 o'clock for that one?
Yes. That sounds good. Good to everybody? Okay. All right. So have a motion to extend until May 14th and to be able to continue the hearing on Thursday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. at 37 Shattuck Street, room 103, if allowed, and if not, the meeting will be conducted remotely if required. So for voting, Delisa,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Jerry,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Anna, I. Okay, so that is continued officially. Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome.
All right, and now we get to the fun part of our agenda. We get to have a presentation from Mark Rassicott and Josh Fiala from MAPC regarding transfer of development rights. Last month, we heard from Mark, who explained transfer of development rights at a fairly high level and the proposed TDR study for Littleton. And as we discussed last month, he will be updating us on his progress during our monthly meetings. And so this evening we have a presentation and a discussion about a proposed survey. So do we have them keyed up ready to talk?
We do. There we go. Okay, Mark, I think we're ready.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for inviting Josh and I to your meeting this evening. You know me, I'm the director of the Land Use Department at Metropolitan Area Planning Council. I want to introduce my colleague, Josh Fiala. Josh is a principal planner here at MAPC. He's been with Metropolitan Area Planning Council since 2016. Prior to that time, he worked at a variety of planning firms and architecture firms. Josh comes to us as a certified planner and also as a registered architect. He will be undertaking the real estate market analysis portion of the transfer of development rights project. I'll introduce Josh to take over the presentation in a few minutes. What I wanted to start with, though, is what is shown, or was shown, there it's back again, is shown on the screen.
Sorry.
Which has also been posted apparently on the planning board portion of the town website. This is a document that I wanted to run by you because it is the concepts that we want to include in the survey that is related to transfer of development rights. That was a requirement of the grant that you received from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. The purpose of this survey is to gather public feedback and to educate the public about transfer of development rights. The first portion of the survey is envisioned as being a letter from the planning board. So I put something together here that you can feel free to edit and get back to me. Basically just introducing the fact that the town is investigating the the possibility of using transfer of development rights as a means of preserving open space in town and clustering development in certain areas that are consistent with the town's master plan. So the first part, as I said, is the letter. And then Maren, if you could go to the next page. The next portion of the survey is meant to be an educational element. What I wanted to do was not overwhelm folks, but to provide enough information about transfer of development rights so that they would be able to have the knowledge necessary to take the survey. So what I've done is I have taken, I believe, 7 slides from the PowerPoint that I used at the last planning board meeting. And as you can see, these are the first 2 slides. Maren, if you go to the next page. These slides talk in general about the objectives of transfer of development rights and provides a visual, conceptual illustration of how it works, where you're moving the development rights from the farmland and you're bringing it in and you are increasing the density in a commercial area. Maren, next slide, please. This just provides a little bit of information, the definitions of what a development right is, ascending area, receiving area. And then it starts to talk about what are the areas that are the potential areas for sending zones. And you saw these at the last meeting. Maren, next slide, please. And then it talks about the receiving areas. And that's it pretty much for the PowerPoint presentation, just to give people a background on what TDR is. Next slide, please, Maren. Then the next section really is a verbal description of an example of how TDR could work. It begins by saying that in order for transfer of development rights to work, there has to be a market for this on the open market. And so it's enabled by the town establishing a receiving area and a process by which the development rights may be able to be transferred to that receiving area with the approval of the planning board. But in order for the developer to increase the density in that receiving area, the developer must purchase development rights elsewhere in town. So it follows with an example. The example of a 2-acre parcel, which could have commercial on it at the moment. But through the overlay district, the developer is enabled to purchase development rights. So they would have to buy development rights in order to establish the type of development that they wanted. And in this particular example, it's a development that has some residential over retail and then additional residential to the rear of the retail. Then we get into a series of very short, very short survey. So the first question on the survey is, where in town would you, as a member of the citizenry of the town, where would you like to see the receiving areas? And we have listed several possible areas. These don't all have to stay in there. This is why I'm showing it to you tonight. If you want to take some of these out, we can certainly do that. If you take out the last one, F, which is the other, please specify, that actually makes my job a lot easier as reading the survey, because it won't be an open-ended question and we wouldn't have to interpret a lot. But we did decide that we would put that in there initially, pending your comment. So then we go on to the second question on the next page. And by the way, this will be formatted very differently once I give it to the folks in MAPC who actually develop the surveys. I just wanted to get these concepts down on paper, get feedback from you. So in this portion, in this question, we're trying to reach for what's the type of density that folks might be willing to accept in the receiving areas. But since density is difficult to judge, many people couldn't tell me, for instance, the difference between 2 or 3 units per acre and 10 units per acre, what it would look like. So what we're doing is we're using height as a proxy for density, and we can go from there. So the goal here is we're asking folks to identify the density at which they would feel comfortable in the receiving area. Now, when we talked to Jerry earlier in the week, he noted that this is not perfect, and it absolutely is not perfect. If for instance, in the end, we find out that people are fine with 2.5 story through the survey, that doesn't mean that the planning board couldn't have in the bylaw a provision that would enable them, where topography allows it, to have taller structures where, for instance, the hill would rise up behind it and the structure would not look as large. So this is not to be set in stone, but we're trying to get some feedback from the residents. So what we've done is we've selected examples of structures from around the MAPC region. This is a 2-story. It's in Bedford. Marion, if you could go to the next page. These are some 2.5-story structures. The top one is in Manchester by the Sea. The bottom one is in Duxbury. Next page. These are examples of 3-story structures. The top is in Situate. The bottom is in Falmouth. That's not in MAPC, at least not yet. And then the next page is 3.5-story, which is in Canton Center. So we're trying to get a feel for what folks would be comfortable with in the receiving areas. And the idea on this particular one is they would select the one that represents the densest that they would feel comfortable with. Then moving on to the next page, we get into a description of a question that's related to the sending areas. Because not all sending areas are equal, really. They could be, or they don't have to be. The town could place a priority, for instance, on lands that have a couple of different features. For instance, if it's an agricultural area that also protects a water supply, that also includes some woodland that is wildlife habitat, that might be more important than just woodland. Or if it's a roadside farm, it may be more important than farm that is not visible. So we're trying to reach for what folks feel might be a priority, and then we can discuss with the planning board later whether or not, based on that, you want to provide a slightly different bonus for preservation of areas that have additional characteristics. So in this case, we're asking people to rank their top 3 categories that they would feel are important to protect. And then Marion, the next slide. The last question relates to the types of development that folks would be interested in seeing in the receiving areas. This is meant to see if they would be willing to see not just the apartment style structures, but would they support other types of things? And so we're asking them to check all that apply in this case. And so on this particular page, we have single family units on small lots, as well as what are commonly called cottage cluster developments, which are smaller units, usually around 12 to 1,500 square feet in size, that are clustered around small greens, that parking is nearby, but is not necessarily on the same parcel. The one on the left is at Union Point, otherwise known as the South Weymouth Naval Air Station. The one on the right on the bottom is from the Concord River Walk in the town of Concord. Marion, the next slide, please. And then we have townhomes, as well as the apartments over retail, and then just general apartment style structures. So in this case, we're trying to reach for the types of development that people would accept going into the areas that are designated as the receiving areas. So with that, I think it's probably best to just have some questions, or you can think about this and get me comments by early next week. What do you think?
Don't all jump at once. I
It just
think
seems
you're
like-
right about about getting rid of the last question. So it's not open-ended to make your job a little easier, Mark.
Well, that would be fine. We could take out the open-ended question. I don't think we actually really need that this time, because my guess is that that you're going to start with one or maybe two receiving areas, and I think that the one that you as the planning board are focused on really is the area around the train station. We were just trying to see if there were other areas that folks really felt were important to also consider, if not now, then in the future.
Could we get some images for the sending areas to get people excited? An image, I mean,
I like that idea. We can do that.
I mean, forestry, farmland, whatever.
Sure. Yep.
And I tend to like when you first started, you had the mixed use examples, but I tend to think that this is going to be used more for residential, and then toward the end of the presentation, there were more of these different type of residential, typologies, which I think is what we should emphasize.
I think that there will not be much of a market for mixed use because, for instance, down at the train station, there just isn't going to be enough density there to support a lot of first floor retail. I think what you will wind up with is predominantly the residential, and you may have some small convenience retail that might be related to the developments, as well as the folks who are commuting to the train station. But I agree, it's not going to be a lot.
So I have two quick comments, Mark. One is on the very first introductory page, where you say the survey will then ask you a number of questions.
Yes.
It would be helpful to just say we will then ask you just 4 simple questions, because
Okay.
I think the length of it at first caught me off guard. And then when I went through it, it was okay. But I think if people know that they only have to answer 4 questions, it might not seem so daunting.
Okay, sounds good.
And then the other comment was, or question I should say, is under the very first question. So they will be able to check off all that apply. So they could technically check off all of them if they wanted to. It
Yes.
says, oh, okay, great. So those are my only 2 comments about it. And I like the photos. I think they are representative of what we're trying to get across. And in adding in what Jeff recommended would be good. Did anybody else have a sense that maybe it felt a little too dense? At first it did, but then once I went through it, I was okay with it. I just want to make sure that we're not going to scare off our potential survey takers.
I would just narrow the number of sure. I mean, you got A, B, C, D. What, you go out to E, F?
Yeah.
We went to E in the section where we were talking about the density. I could also shorten it by only having, one image of each of the different heights. But I thought that folks might like the diversity of styles, and that might provide them with a sense of ease. But it's up to you guys.
It's just me. Are you gonna do this in SurveyMonkey?
No, we actually use a product called Qualtrics, and it's similar to SurveyMonkey. We can set it up so that you don't have to look at the PowerPoint first. We can set it up in a way that the PowerPoint is optional, and people could just go straight to the questions. The only issue there is I feel like it might be important to have some educational element to this prior to asking the 4 questions.
No, my only comment there was gonna be typically when we send surveys out, and we send a lot of them out. If you have to scroll multiple pages to answer one question, those questions typically fail in the survey.
Good point. And I know that Elise Harmon, who is our Qualtrics expert, would make sure that each of the questions fits on one page. You're not going to have to scroll.
Yep.
I think the
Make
images,
sure of that, though. Thank you.
Yeah. I think the images are sort of important, and this is complicated. And
No, I'm just talking about the survey experience when
Okay.
not what's in the survey.
just
So
like combine them more or whatever. Yeah, onto each.
user design in a survey is almost as important as the questions if you want to get a good result.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to emphasize that this is not the final format.
Yeah.
This was merely to get the ideas out to you. I didn't want to have our survey production person work on it until I was sure that you were happy with the content.
Mhm. Will we see the draft before it goes out?
We can do that. I anticipate that we could have that draft hopefully by the May meeting.
That'll be good.
So you're asking us to take this info and make comments on it?
If you want to, or you could just give me all the comments now. Your choice.
I think I'd like to look at it. I'll look at it on on the website and make comments, and I'll talk to Maren about what to do with them.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
It would be great if you could try to do that. Would that be possible within a week?
Sure. Yeah.
Because that way, a week from now, I could bring it to sort of the pre-production.
hmm
You sit there not doing nothing, right, Jeff?
Yeah. Yes. I actually am, but still, I can do it in a week.
Okay. All right. So at this point, what I'd like to do is
Mark, hold on real quick. So, Delisa, did you have any comments?
No, I think everybody has covered the only comments I had. So
Okay.
if I think of, I reviewed it before the meeting. So if I take a look at it again and I think of something, I'll let Maren know.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Mark, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Okay.
I'm good.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Josh Fiala for the beginning of the discussion related to the valuation of the transferable development rights. Josh?
Great. Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
So, Maren, can you share, or can I share my screen now?
You should be able to.
All right. Let me see. All right. Whoops. Can you all see this presentation?
Yes.
All right. Let me get back to the beginning. Oh, it's like I made it freeze. I quit that and get it back up. It's all ready to go, and then the computer just slows me down. It's been, I have to give my computer some patience these days because it's been put through its paces for sure. All right, let me try this again. Can you see that all?
Yes.
All right. So this is maybe a little bit of review from the presentation that you all had with Mark last month, but it does get into the next layer of detail that we're thinking about in the TDR study, and basically outlines where Mark and I are headed with the market analysis and the valuation of transfer development right units, and the hopes to get your feedback and input this evening before we embark on too much of that detailed analysis. All right. So I think the really elegant thing about the TDR process is that it builds upon many of the planning strategies and goals that the town has documented through things like the master plan and the OSRP. And it's a very elegant solution from a smart growth perspective in that it allows the town to both preserve agricultural and conservation land and also to foster commercial and residential activity in the areas where it would like to, while also at the same time reducing sprawl. So it's really a nice solution to integrate those aspects of what the town would like to do. So the protection and enhancement of those conservation lands, as shows up in the OSRP, building upon things like the more recent station village plan, and looking at ways to densify and improve the mixed use centers of activity within the town. All of those things TDR is building from and can help the town with in the future. So I think the basis for it is solid, and now Mark and I are just thinking about how that can actually work from a numbers perspective is the next big step. So Mark's outlined in generality in the survey the sending and receiving areas. These are listed again on the screen. And one of the aspects of the study, of course, is zeroing in on what those potential areas would be, both from the sending area perspective and the receiving area perspective. And as Mark suggests, that would be likely through the initial effort of creating the bylaw, a initial sort of pilot approach to these two areas. And then over time, if it's seen as successful, those areas could grow both in terms of what's being sent and what is receiving. So you can see some of those on the screen. The receiving areas, the Point, the Littleton train station area, Littleton Common village area. So that relates directly back to the current zoning of the town. You all know it better than we do. You're dealing with it all the time. But basically anything that is not in yellow, so anything that's not the Residence R district, would be a potential receiving area. And those are the areas which are already denser in nature, have more densely defined dimensional and building standards in those zones, and then are the areas that would be adequate in terms of infrastructure and the ability to receive a little bit more density. While the areas which are represented by the Residence District in yellow are those which want to be conserved and preserved, or held and conserved for agricultural, forestry, or other purposes. So that works out pretty clearly in the zoning map is kind of a general sending and receiving area map already. We are looking at the intensity of use schedule related to those zoning districts and understanding how they would relate to the creation and valuation of units, both units of value being sent from the receiving areas and being received, being sent from the sending areas and being received from the receiving areas, sorry. And the thing to pay attention to here is that the unit of a building lot in the Residence District is 40,000 square feet, so just shy of 1 acre. And so that will factor into the calculations that we're starting to outline. So here's a more generalized aerial map of the town. And as we identify through the surveying and thinking about this in more detail, where those sending areas may be, where some of the receiving areas may be, And then we'll be using both the zoning and recent studies once we figure out which of those districts we're zeroing in on for this initial go around. We'll define the boundaries of those districts very clearly of what's in and what's out. So here's the slide, which we'll spend a little time on just talking through what it means. But this is the approach to the calculation, which Mark and I have been talking through and trying to make as clear and easily understood as possible. So what we're trying to do is both figure out a straightforward way to value the land, which is in the sending area, and create a calculation around that, which can be compared to a similar calculation to determine the value of the land, which would be occurring in the receiving areas. And the whole purpose of this comparison of the sending area land value to the receiving area land value is to determine a transfer ratio. And that ratio would be used to basically define how many units you're moving from a receiving area or from a sending area to a receiving area within that transfer. And that transfer ratio is important to try to get right so that from a real estate market perspective, there are developers out there who would actually find this to be attractive, and landowners actually also who would find this to be an attractive equation. So on the sending area side of things first, what we're looking at is trying to determine on that 40,000 square foot minimum lot size what the basic land value is. And one of the ways for us to approximate the difference in valuation between a fully unencumbered acre of land versus a conservation restricted acre of land is already within the assessor's data and work. And it shows up in the recent OSRP plan. There was a table in that plan which looked at assessed values, both full values and conservation restricted value over the last 5 years or so. So we would be looking at those valuations to understand what that increment of difference is between a unrestricted property and a conservation restricted property, and then dividing that by the 40,000 minimum lot size to effectively come up with a land value for the purchasing of that restriction so that it could not be developed in the future. And then on the receiving side of that equation, what we're looking at is a calculation which is a little more complicated. It's called a residual land value calculation. And we've used this calculation in the past, in past projects which have a real estate market perspective to them, to successful outcomes. And basically what it is a collection of a bunch of assumptions around the value of a piece of land. And those assumptions include the assumptions of development. So land is set aside for a moment. That's kind of what we're solving for in the equation. But we're basically collecting all of the values which would go into the construction of a property, or the development of a property. So construction costs, soft costs, any carrying costs, the cost of capital, all of those things which go into a pro forma that a developer would use to evaluate the financials of a project. And then we're comparing that to the revenue potential of that property. So the rent that could be achieved, the sale of a unit that could be achieved, the potential sale of an entire developed property that could be achieved. All of those assumptions go into that same calculation. And we're basically looking at the relationship of those numbers to come up with a number that a developer would be willing to pay for a piece of land. So that's the residual land value. And then we're going to compare two different scenarios of that residual land value analysis. One scenario which is based upon the current zoning within those districts, or the district that we choose to look at most closely. And then we would be comparing that to the potential value of the added increment of additional housing units or development that could occur if you enable this transfer development right scenario. So that would be additional development rights, which are above and beyond the underlying zoning which exists today. So we basically would subtract the potential added development scenario. We would subtract from it the current base zoning scenario, and that would give us a increment of residual land value that is the value of that additional transferred development unit. And then we divide that by the total number of housing units, literal units that are produced within that scenario. And that would give you a per unit value that's comparable to the per unit value of the sending area land valuation. And we think that's a pretty reliable approach based upon our experience with these types of calculations. And then that would give us that transfer ratio, which I described at the very beginning of this long-winded description of the slide. But that ratio would then be used to calculate the rate of transfer and that would occur between the receiving areas and the sending areas. So I think on the next slide, I'll pause here. This is actually the last slide I have, so maybe I'll just explain this, then we can circle back and discuss this. And these are reviewing some of the things I just described verbally, but it's the sources that we would be using for some of these calculations. And we would be checking in and confirming with the assessor in Littleton here, just to understand how those numbers that are showing up in that table from the OSRP are, making sure that they're the right numbers for this approach. And then the market conditions, which are the assumptions we'll be plugging into that residual land value analysis, will be deriving just from some basic, some real estate sources we have and some internet sleuthing just about current rents and construction costs in the area, things of that nature. So that's the approach we'll embark upon. I know that one of the things Mark has communicated to me from previous discussions with you all is that you'd like to keep this as simple and straightforward as possible. So we've really been scratching our heads on how to approach it in that way. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on how this presentation seemed to you, this is about as straightforward a way as we could think of. I'm sure there's more complicated ways, but we'd be open if someone thinks there's a simpler way to do it. But this, we have stripped away as many moving parts as we possibly can to try to figure out a way to define that ratio dependably and in a way that would actually reflect market conditions. So I'll stop talking and happy to hear people's reaction to all this.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for the presentation and for explaining that.
So
Go ahead, Jerry.
So feedback on the ratio. I mean, it's kind of a black box, right? If you don't see a mathematical example, could you guys actually put an appendix in the slide, show that would walk through a numeric example and show how those inputs would play? That it's, if you try to Fisher Price a presentation like this, it's extremely challenging. So simple examples that, because if you're talking about residual land value, I mean, even the label itself is hard to, what does residual mean? So I just think you should try and find a way to illustrate it, keep it very simple, and focus on the things that are really important for understanding. Like at the end of the day, it's really the ratio between the sender and the receiver that drives the value, but it's not the underlying value itself that even the planning board really cares about. I think that presentation doesn't emphasize that. In other words, we don't care if a selling unit's worth $400,000 or $500,000. We care what the transfer ratio is, and therefore the bonus density to the receiving area and what that means. And that has meaning to us. I just don't think your presentation and I'm sorry I didn't send you these comments in writing, but I don't think that presentation sends that message quite as clearly, that that's really what we're talking about, not so much how you derive the value. Because it's really subjective anyways, but it's not really, we don't want to get caught up haggling over how that residual value is calculated. It's more like the resulting ratio, right?
Correct.
So we don't need to, I just don't think that's something we should get hung up on debating amongst ourselves, because it's not really what we care about.
Right. If I could also weigh in here just for a second. One of the reasons that I didn't encourage Josh to put numbers into here was we don't know what the numbers are yet. And I don't want to have anything out there that may say, you know, the ratio is 1.25, because then, you know, that's going to get stuck in people's minds. And when we actually do the calculations, it may be 1.9 or maybe 2, you know. So, I mean, I could give you an example right now and just say, you know, restricted land is worth 10,000. I'm sorry, unrestricted land, farmland, dry, it's worth $10,000 an acre to a developer. Restricted land that he or she may be able to earn a living on after it's restricted. They could earn a living by farming. It may be valued at $1,000 an acre. So maybe $9,000 is the value of the transferable right in the sending area. And then on the flip side, after we crunch all of the numbers and we realize that a developer who has only commercial can, you know, earn X number of dollars, but if the developer can have that commercial plus 20 units per acre, then you divide the new value of that by the 20 units, and maybe they'd be willing to pay an additional, let's see, what's an easy number? Maybe they'd pay $12,000 for each of those development rights. So in that case, you know, you've got a difference in value there, where in that case, the development rights are worth more in the receiving area than they are in the sending area. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be the other way around. I think it's going to be the development rights in the sending area, maybe $9,000, and in the receiving area, maybe there's $6,000 per unit that a developer would be willing to pay, because he or she has to do all of the other development and have all the development costs in order to be able to sell that unit. So in that case, if it's worth $9,000 in the sending area and $6,000 in the receiving area, then the developer would have to have a 1.5 bonus in order to break even. So again, you got to get that ratio.
Again, that's the kind of like exampling you'd want to see in sort of simple bullets, just so people can kind of gauge not what the exact number is, but if you're a buyer, you kind of want to know what it means to you. If you're a seller, you kind of want to know what those numbers mean to you and how those ratios apply more on a principles basis than really getting into the numbers. It's not to imply that we've already pre-calculated the ratios. It's just so somebody can see the behavior and how it might work, and then put in some of those assumptions that valuation in the receiving area could be less than or equal to the valuation in the sending area. It's all going to be dependent, you know, at the time of the transaction, because what you really want to get to in the discussion is what type of density do we need to allow for in the receiving area? Because once we understand what that is, then you can figure out how much coverage you actually have in your sending areas and whether or not TDR is actually going to accomplish things like, let's say you have 300 or 400 acres of high value protection area. You want to know that your TDR can actually accommodate that translation into the receiving area. Because if you end up sitting here and say, well, we're designating these areas, and they make the first cut, if a seller approaches the town and says, hey, I have 200 acres, I want to do this for 100 acres, and I'd like to be able to apply it to the current zoning, you want to know that you can fit those 100 units into your receiving area and not find out later on that you only got 50 left and I can't help you anyways. I can only do half your lot.
So Jerry, if I may pause right there, because we do need to open and continue the last hearing. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we'll return back to this conversation. Thank you. It is 7:45 p.m. and item number 5 on our agenda is the continued public hearing for the Reuben Hoare Library slope site. So we are opening and then continuing this public hearing. We determined earlier in our board discussion that we would continue this public hearing to Thursday, May 7th. We didn't set a time. So let's see. Maren, do we have anything else scheduled for that date on May 7th yet?
No, we could put this right at 6:45.
Okay. So that sounds good. Thursday, May 7th, 6:45 p.m. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All right, so have a motion to continue the public hearing for the Reuben Hoare Library slope site until Thursday, May 7th at 6:45 p.m. at 37 Shattuck Street, room 103, if allowed, and if not allowed, then we will do the meeting remotely if it's required. So let's go ahead and vote. And Delisa.
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Jerry?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Anna? Aye. All right, great. So that particular hearing will be continued. Okay, so we can go back to item number 4 and continue our discussion from where Jerry was just talking about transfer development rights.
Is the result of this going to be a number or a formula? I guess my issue is that sending and receiving areas aren't going to be of equal value even among themselves. Some are going to be more desirable than others. So what's the intention? Is that we set up a process where we, for a specific proposal, we establish that, or is there going to be just one number to fit everything?
No, yeah. So Jeff, that's where I was trying to, like, as we go through talking about this, there's sort of a punchline in all of this, and the punchline is what you just alluded to with your question, is the disparity in price between the buyer and the seller. And there's a couple of different ways to address that in a which is called a match trade scenario, where you are the seller and I am the buyer. I come to you and I say, hey, I see you have some land. I'd like to buy not your land, but I'd like to buy your development rights. You agree to sell those rights to me at X price. I agree to that price. That's going to have some intrinsic value to me based on my development in the target area, the receiving area. And that's really up to me to figure out how to make that valuation work, right, as the developer. Then there's another scenario where it's not match trading. You and I are not matched. You're a landowner, you want to sell your development rights to part of your land, and you're going to sell it to a bank now. And that bank will buy it, and and Mark can talk about how that might work, but the bank would then buy it and hold it and wait for a buyer. Meaning, like, if the town was acting as the intermediary, the town would be the holder of the rights and could sell those rights to any developer in the town who was developing a receiving area, in which case you've now divorced selling price completely from purchasing price. Where the valuation comes in is the ratio, the translation ratio between what the sold unit was from the protected farm area to the area where you're going to develop. So in other words, if you sell me 10 units from your farm, those 10 units might actually be worth, and I'm just going to throw a number out here, could be worth 1.5 times 10. So now it's worth 15 units, even though I only bought 10. And it's only because I'm developing in that receiving area, and because that's the calculated ratio. So the bank, in that scenario, you have different market forces in play than when it's just you and I doing a match trade. And that's sort of where, like, that's where this conversation needs to progress. But I think we're trying to sort of like step our way through it, just to cover all the bases as we go up. But that's sort of what your end game is how do you want to deploy this? Are we advocating match trade, or are we doing an intermediary where there's a middleman who takes the risk of holding those rights and then selling them in the future? And Mark can, feel free to jump in here, but the benefit to the town there would be maybe protecting land up front. Even though you're taking a risk, you're still assuming that it's the town's paying a lower market price to protect that land than if they had to buy it outright. So that's where your trade-offs are in the sort of bank scenario. But in the one-to-one match, that's between the buyer and the seller. It's really not. That's why I'm saying we as a town step away from that. Like, we don't care what the price is. We just care about the ratio.
So Josh, were you trying to come up with a ratio that would be the ratio? And then I'll just make two questions. Mark, you had mentioned that the state was trying to set up this bank system. Is there any progress on that? Will that happen?
Josh, why don't you go first?
Sure. Yeah, I think that ultimately, yes, what we're solving for is the ratio. That's really the crown jewel of what we're trying to figure out. I think what we're doing is trying to set up a reliable methodology that then we can all decide if it wants to apply in the town universally, or if it wants to have specificity to specific receiving and sending areas. And that's a level of complexity that the town may or may not want to get into. If we think that once we go through this calculation and it looks like the ratio that we discover or solve for has a sort of a variation range that's pretty tight, depending on, regardless of the assumptions that are being used, then it might not be that important to differentiate between different zones within the town. If we're seeing quite a bit of fluctuation, like we can, as we're doing these calculations, we can do a little bit of sensitivity analysis. So playing with the different variables and seeing how much the ratio would move if we play with different variables in different ways. Then we may, as Jerry's suggesting, want to take a look at a series of ratios. So if you're sending from this area to this receiving area, then it would have one ratio. If it's another part of town, it might have another. That definitely gets a little more complicated and more nuanced. But ultimately what you're looking for is the ratio, and we're trying to give you a reliable methodology which can be replicated for other areas or at other points in time if you think the ratio needs to be adjusted, say 10 years from now or something.
Isn't this something that's really going to involve a peer reviewer, a specialist to come up, real estate specialist on a case-by-case basis to weigh in? We're going to transfer it from this. We're going to send it over to here, and each transaction is going to be, you're going to have to come up with a value, and we're going to have we use peer reviews for everything now. We're going to have a peer review come in and say, I agree with the methodology, how they came up with it. This one's at 1.5 or it's at 1.8.
No, it wouldn't be done that way. We would establish a townwide baseline, which you'd have to update periodic. That's something we'd have to agree on, is how would you periodically update your ratio calculation as valuations change over time? But you don't care what the negotiated transaction is between two individuals. You've established that ratio baseline for some period of time until it's reevaluated. And that's what the transaction ratio is based on. But as far as the underlying numbers go, you wouldn't get into that.
Yeah, the easiest way for this to progress is to provide certainty for the developer. If the developer knows that within a receiving area, he or she has a certain density that they can achieve within that area through the special permit. Let's just say, for sake of example, at the Littleton train station area, the overlay says that you can have 10 units per acre. A developer recognizing that can evaluate it and say, all right, I can get 10 units per acre in here. And according to the bylaw, because of the ratio that was established at the time the bylaw was written, for every unit that I buy from the farmland, I will get 2 units in the receiving area. So I can then crunch the numbers on that and decide if it's worth my while to go out and buy farmland to do that. So, for instance, if the development, well, I'm not even going to use numbers. I'll just use the scenario again. If I can get 10 units per acre, I would need to buy 5 development rights elsewhere, if that's the ratio that's in the bylaw. As Jerry says, after that, the planning board doesn't care whether I am a very astute purchaser and manage to get a great deal on those development rights, or if I get if I lose my shirt on it, it's up to me as the developer to negotiate that, knowing that I can get the certain density in the receiving area. The ratio is set, and the important thing here is the work that Josh is going to be doing will help you to understand the market as it currently exists, so that you will understand that in order for a developer to be interested in buying development rights, they have to make a profit, and they have all their costs that they have to handle, including carrying cost of land, etc. So you've got to make sure that they can turn a profit. And we build that into the calculation when we're establishing this initial ratio. And
Mark, excuse me, Mark,
Yeah.
we have one of our members who wanted to say something and then she has to go.
Yeah, sorry, everybody. I've got to jump off a call, jump off this call to jump onto another call. So thank you, Josh and Mark, for all the information, and Anna and Maren, I'll follow up with you guys tomorrow, but I think we're probably pretty close to wrapping up.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
everybody, stay healthy.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mark, I'm sorry, please.
So the bottom line is, yes, the key thing that we're going to be working on from this is the ratio. And then from that, everything else will progress. You can have this one-to-one purchaser seller type of arrangement that Jerry was just talking about. And I think for the sake of tonight, I'll leave it there, and we'll talk about at the next meeting when we actually have some numbers, perhaps. Then we can get into examples of how that transfer of development rights bank may occur. I have not heard anything from Kurt Gärtner. Kurt is working remotely at this point in time. I don't have his cell phone number. He did tell me before he went on this remote work that he was going to do his best to get the regulations for this bank done as part of his remote work. But I suspect it's still a year away. I suspect that by the time you pass this at town meeting, the bank may exist, but I don't think it will exist much before that.
Okay, great.
Well, I, for one, am really interested in whatever ratio you come up with. This sounds really, like you said, Josh, there's just a whole basket of assumptions, and it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Well, and one of the questions that I had about the ratio, because typically when you have a ratio, people want to know, well, what's a good ratio? And if there is any sort of guidance that can be provided based on historical knowledge that would be helpful to be able to work from, because in the business field, obviously, there are all kinds of different ratios. In the building field, there are ratios, and you have that range between something that is good. So if that's something that's realistic to be able to provide to us in terms of what is that range of good ratios, that would also potentially be helpful.
But Anna, that's the trick, right? Once the ratio is the good ratio, there's no range. Or if you look at the way that formula is constructed, if your numerators and denominators are moving, those relationships, right? They're trying to optimize and say, hey, this is the optimal ratio for right now. And then the key question there is, well, how long is right now going to last, and when should you recalculate that ratio to see if that optimal ratio holds?
Right.
And this is not dynamic modeling, so it's not like you're Monte Carlo this thing out and you figured it out, over 10,000 possibilities. This is going to be a point in time, and that market's going to drift on you, and so there has to be some mechanism in there to evaluate your ratios periodically, and we need to figure out what that should be.
But also the ratio can reflect a certain anxiousness for this to happen. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. Do we can set the ratio in a way to advantage, to sort of push developers to think about this, or is it just something that's just what it is?
Well, again, this is where this goes into our overall design, right? So if you say, look, the calculated optimal ratio is 1.5. I'm just throwing that number out there. You go out there at that ratio, you now apply that through your various layers of zoning. So like if your overlay allows for 10 per acre, but you want to account for so many units of TDR, you now have to look at that and say, well, 1.5 may be too aggressive, and I may not now be able to fit all my TDR units into my receiving area, right? So you're guessing right on what you're receiving here. So you're trying to find a sweet spot where you can say, I need to incentivize my developers to want to buy these things. I need to incentivize my sellers to want to provide them. And then I need to have the room to get there. So you're going to look at this optimal number that's put out there, and then we're going to have to sort of figure out whether it's mathematically or anecdotally, whether that's actually going to fit in your receiving area. So there'll be we're going to have to tune and then see if people bite. And that's where I'd say you would have to look at your inputs to your formula at that point and say, well, how are we deriving this? So what if 1.5, you have no buyers? Then we have to look at that ratio and say, okay, now why do we have a disparity between what the market is asking for versus what we're calculating? And that's where you have to refine your methodology. So I'm saying that the bylaw itself is going to have language in there that allows for the ratio to be responsive, I should say. The ratio should be responsive to current market conditions to keep it marketable through time. And I don't know that we have any provisions that do that. Otherwise, you'll be stuck with a ratio that was calculated and it may not be working anymore because, I mean, just take this COVID incident, for instance. I'm sure the real estate market is markedly different today than it was 4 months ago. And what is that impact? I don't know, and I don't need to know. But if we had a ratio like that had already been calculated, and that's what our bylaw was running on, how would you adjust that? What's the framework to make that adjustment? How do you address those issues without having to go to another town meeting and, get a new vote?
Yeah.
Which you don't want to have to do, right?
Great. Well, I'm very interested in hearing what the outcome of our discussion will be in May as well. I had one more question, more so around process for all of this, because it does include future conversations with Board of Selectmen. What are members' thoughts about at what point do we have a joint conversation with the Board of Selectmen about this? Because the first time they hear about it may very well be during the survey portion. And I believe we had invited them to the last meeting as well. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, are you trying to inform them? What's the goal of the meeting? Just
Yeah, the goal of the meeting would be to inform them about this. Yes.
Well, so couldn't we ask couldn't we send a representative to their meeting just to give them an overview of the current scope of work and
We
what the
certainly
goals
could.
are?
Yeah, we certainly could. Okay.
I mean, do we need to meet, or is this something Maren can do through the town administrator, or do you need a live presentation?
Well, I think ultimately it's good to be able to have someone from the board and Maren to be able to provide an update as to what this is about, what's going on. I just don't want to, I just want to make sure that our Board of Selectmen is feeling included in all of this, because again, these are pretty big decisions, pretty big new ideas that we're having here. So I just want to make sure that they are included in an appropriate way. And I agree with you that if we can get time on their agenda, and as the project lead on this, if you would be able to do that, that would be great, Jerry. Any other thoughts, Jeff or Mark?
I think it was a little early. Maybe once we'll have a better idea after the 7th of May
Okay.
to bring them up. We don't, maybe we'll have a rough idea, a model of what the ratio possibly could be, so that we'd be able to give them a little more information. This is all still fact finding on our part.
Okay.
The other issue is this town election, when it eventually occurs, it would be better to present to the board the results after the election.
Okay.
Results of what?
Pardon?
Results of what?
Oh, the town election. I assume there's some selectmen seats that people are running for that. In other words.
Oh, you mean once the boards have been updated?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that input. So we'll look to provide maybe a update to them at their meeting after the town election. Mark, is there anything, Mark Resicott, is there anything else that you and Josh wanted to talk through? Is there anything you need from us other than our input on the document?
If you have input on the document, I think that's the most important thing. And
Okay.
if you have questions, you could forward those to us as well. In the meantime, I think that what we'll do is we'll just get started on running some numbers for you, so that hopefully when we meet with you next, which I guess would be on the 7th, we would try to have at least some preliminary numbers for you at that time.
That sounds great. Terrific. Well, thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for arranging the technology.
It works.
It's great.
Okay, great.
Pretty good.
So members, anything else? I see no's. Okay. All right. Well, thank you to anyone watching tonight. And we look forward to seeing you all on Thursday, April 23rd for our next meeting. And stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll.
Oh, wait, did you say April 23rd?
Yes, sir.
That's my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
And what kind of cake do you like?
We'll
We can
send
all
it-
eat it while you watch us.
Not like you can go out to dinner, Mark. I mean, Jerry.
That's
That's a good point.
a good point.
It's my 50th birthday, so
Ooh,
Just a baby.
I might not be
I'm just a young person.
We might be drinking while we're on the.
it could
Well, so we're on a roll here because we had a meeting on my birthday. We had a meeting on Mark's birthday. So it's just apropos that we have a meeting on your birthday, Jerry.
make it a quick one. All right. See you
All
guys.
right. Well, thank you. Thank you, guys. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
So did
Oh, I'm
motion to
sorry. I'm sorry.
adjourn?
Yeah.
We need a formal adjournment.
Wouldn't hurt.
Move we adjourn.
I second.
All right. All those in favor, Mark,
Aye.
Jerry,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Anna, aye. All right. Thank
Great.
you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Aye.
Good night.
Over and out. Stay safe, Myron.
Thank you.